My name is Imani Washington. Just 24 hours ago, I laid my husband, the love of my life, to rest. I returned home, still wrapped in grief, only to find his father, Joseph, and his brother, Marcus, methodically emptying our house. "This isn't your home," my father-in-law sneered, a cruel smile tugging at his lips. "It never was. Pack your bags. You have 1 hour." They assumed I was a helpless, grieving widow. Penniless. Broken. But they had forgotten one critical detail: I wasn't powerless. Before I go any further, tell me where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you've ever had to fight for what's rightfully yours. Because this journey, this story, it will shock you. I'm Imani Washington, 34 years old. And this morning, exactly 24 hours after watching them lower Jamal's casket into the ground, I stepped back into what used to be our home. I called it empty, but I never imagined it would feel so literal. The rain in Inman Park hammered against the pavement, a cold, driving sheet that mirrored the numbness in my chest. Fatigue weighed me down, my hand barely lifted to punch in the keypad. But it didn't matter, the front door was wide open. The truck was unmistakable, Washington and Son Construction painted boldly on its side. My heart stopped, then pounded like a drum in my ribs. Inside, the rain's rhythm softened beneath my careful steps on the wet hardwood. Joseph stood in the center of the living room, his posture rigid, his eyes icy. "You're finally back," he said, voice devoid of even a hint of sympathy. "I was beginning to wonder when you'd show up to collect your underwear." I couldn't respond. I just watched as Marcus hauled our velvet sofa, the very first piece Jamal and I had ever bought together, toward the door. "Joseph. Marcus. What are you doing?" My voice barely escaped as a whisper. "Stop, that's ours." Then Brittany, my sister-in-law, appeared from the kitchen, glass of champagne in hand. Champagne. At 9 in the morning. The day after her brother's funeral. "Oh, Imani, sweetie," she cooed, her voice thick with false pity. "Jamal is gone. That means the family connection is gone. It's over." She sipped delicately, smug and untouchable. I froze. The grief that had felt like a heavy, suffocating blanket was suddenly pierced by a sharp spike of cold fury. Outside, Tasha and Kevin moved through the small crowd of mourners like predators. My sister, Tasha, 35, walked as though she owned the runway of the world, not the wet pavement outside the First Baptist Church of Atlanta. A cruel, tiny smirk played on her lips, familiar, precise, and utterly infuriating. She scanned me from head to toe, black dress, flat shoes, hair plastered to my scalp by the rain. Meanwhile, she flaunted a ludicrous, fur-trimmed, wide-shouldered coat, entirely inappropriate for our mother's funeral. Beside her, Kevin Price, my ex-fiancé, 40 years old, the man who once swore he would love me forever, shielded her from the rain, not me. "Poor you, Imani," Tasha's voice cut through the rain. Sickly sweet, sticky with fake pity, far more cutting than outright hatred. "Still alone at 38, just look at you, shivering like a wet cat. It's so sad." I said nothing. Grief pressed down like a stone in my stomach, too heavy to allow a single word. I simply stared. Tasha mistook my silence for submission. Slowly, deliberately, she raised her left hand, pushing her perfectly styled hair back. The 10-carat diamond on her finger caught the gray light, flashing like a weapon. She knew exactly how to wield it. "I guess I should be thankful," she continued, voice loud enough to draw the eyes of nearby cousins. "I got everything, didn't I? The man. The money. The mansion." She leaned her head against Kevin's shoulder, the picture of perfection, devotion, and triumph. "Right, baby," she purred, nodding at Kevin, my ex-fiancé. The man who once held my hand, who had whispered promises of a future in this very city, now looked at me with that same hollow arrogance I remembered from the night he betrayed me. Kevin had the audacity to wrap his arm around Tasha's waist, pulling her closer, as if he were displaying a trophy. "Imani," he said, his voice smooth, dripping with condescension. "We are just so sorry for all of this." His hand gestured vaguely toward the church, toward my grief. Your mother passing, it must be incredibly hard, especially since you have no one else to lean on. No one to depend on. His words hit like knives. Not just insults, they were the very foundation of the lie they had spent nearly a decade perfecting. The story they had told the world, the one carefully polished to justify every betrayal. The story where I was pathetic. Unstable. The career-driven, ambitious daughter who somehow couldn't keep a man. The story where Tasha lived in comfort, as the perfect wife, while I struggled for approval. Grief still weighed on me, but it shifted, making room for a cold, hard fury that tasted like steel. That lie Kevin had just spoken, no one to depend on, was the lie they had built their entire relationship on. For 9 agonizing years, Tasha and Kevin had meticulously crafted this narrative, painting me as the unstable, unworthy sister who lived off our mother Brenda. They fed it to relatives, to friends, to anyone who would listen. It justified everything, the betrayal, the theft, the deception. In their story, Tasha hadn't stolen Kevin, she had saved him from me, the ambitious, difficult, ungrateful daughter. My mother, God rest her soul, had been the silent architect of that story. From the beginning, Tasha was the golden child. Beautiful, charming, effortlessly manipulative. She got what she wanted with a flutter of her lashes. I was the problem child. Why? Because I had dared to pursue a degree in data analytics, because I wanted a career, because I valued ambition over appearances. Imani, my mother used to say, voice heavy with disappointment, all those books won't keep you warm at night. You need to find a good, rich man, like your sister. She never understood me. She never supported me. So when Tasha decided she wanted Kevin, my mother didn't stop her. She helped her. When I caught them together in that apartment, when my engagement ring was gone, my mother's first words were, Imani, don't make a scene. You probably pushed him away, working all those late hours. For 9 years, she stood by Tasha as she stole, lied, and built a life on my pain. All those tears I shed inside the church were not just for the mother I had lost, they were for the mother I never had. And now, standing here, listening to Kevin, the man who had betrayed me, and Tasha, the sister who had enabled him, the suffocating grief in my chest didn't vanish. It shifted. Made space for something else. Something sharp. Cold. Hard. A single thought cut through the haze of sorrow and grief, pure and unrelenting. They couldn't even wait for the dirt on her grave to settle. I had cried every tear I possessed inside that church. There was nothing left of me to give. I fixed my gaze on Tasha, on her 10-carat diamond, on that smug, pitiless expression she wore like armor. And for the first time in 9 years, I did not feel small. I did not feel ashamed. Instead, I felt cold. Calm. Quiet. And infinitely powerful. A small, effortless smile brushed my lips, one that needed no force. You're right, Tasha, I said, my voice cutting through the damp air like a blade. You got the man. You had him. I let the words hang, heavy, deliberate. Then I leaned slightly, letting the pause stretch. But, have you met my husband yet? The smirk on her face froze mid-motion, as if time itself had stuttered. Kevin beside her looked genuinely confused. Tasha's eyes narrowed, scanning my face for the lie she had spent 9 years expecting, searching for desperation. She found none. And then she laughed. It wasn't a real laugh. It was harsh, screeching, a weapon meant to humiliate, meant to put me back in my place. A husband, she shrieked, loud enough for our aunties to hear. Oh, Imani, please. Who are you trying to fool? That pathetic little IT guy from last year? Did you finally trick him into signing a paper? She turned to Kevin, seeking his validation. A husband, can you believe this? Did she really marry him in secret? Why was no one in the family invited? Why wasn't he at the funeral? Her gaze snapped back to me, venom dripping from her words. Oh my God, is he so broke he couldn't even afford a suit? Are you that desperate to one-up me that you invented a whole husband? Her laughter rang sharp, but underneath, I heard the faint tremor of panic. This wasn't part of her story. This wasn't the narrative she had controlled for 9 long years. I said nothing. I held her gaze. I let her unravel, digging herself deeper with every insult. Her shrieking became just noise, as meaningless as the rain pounding the pavement. It did not touch me. While she performed, attempting to humiliate me in front of our family, my eyes scanned the crowd. I looked past her shoulder, past Kevin's increasingly uneasy expression, and there he was. Standing near the church entrance, in quiet conversation with our pastor, was him. Tall, African-American, around 42, clad in a perfectly tailored charcoal gray suit. He carried a presence that needed no announcement, calm, assured, impossible to ignore. A stark contrast to Kevin, whose energy always screamed for attention. I waited, letting Tasha's laughter sputter into an awkward silence. Then, softly, just enough for him to hear, I called his name. "My husband," I murmured. He looked up immediately, eyes locking with mine across the courtyard, a quiet, steady acknowledgement that made everything else, Tasha, Kevin, their lies, fade into irrelevance. The pastor finished speaking, and Marcus nodded respectfully. "Honey, can you come over here for a moment?" Tasha's mocking smile faltered. Her eyes flicked to mine, confusion written across her face. Who is she talking to? She muttered under her breath to Kevin. Marcus ended his conversation with the pastor with a firm handshake and began walking toward us. There was no rush in his movement, yet every step commanded attention. He didn't glance at Tasha or Kevin. His eyes were locked on me, radiating a quiet, unwavering concern that made my chest tighten in the best way possible. Kevin, however, noticed immediately. The color drained from his face. Not just pale, chalk-white, sickly. His millionaire swagger evaporated, leaving behind a man reduced to a trembling, terrified boy. Tasha, still caught up in her own performance, didn't even notice her husband's sudden unraveling. She was too busy trying to decipher whatever trick I was playing. She had no idea the man approaching was the one holding all the cards. Marcus reached my side. His hand rested gently, firmly, on the small of my back. A simple touch, yet it anchored me, grounding me in the storm Tasha had unleashed. "Are you okay?" he murmured, voice low, meant only for me. His eyes searched mine for any sign of distress. I gave the tiniest, almost imperceptible nod. Only then did his gaze lift. Tasha, still trapped in her own narrative, snapped, "Imani. What is this? What stupid trick are you playing now? Did you hire this guy? An actor just to humiliate me?" "I am talking to you," I said, voice calm, deliberate. "Who is he?" Kevin couldn't answer. His face betrayed him completely. The man who had flaunted his mansion, his wealth, his power, was unraveling before our eyes. Chalk-white, eyes wide, a sheen of sweat forming on his forehead despite the cold November rain. He was frozen, staring at Marcus as if the world had just tipped on its axis, his mouth slightly open, terror written all over his features. He looked ready to collapse right there on the church steps. Finally, Tasha stopped her screaming. For the first time, she looked past me to her husband, and saw what I already had. She saw the panic. The fear. The unraveling of the man she thought she controlled. Her smirk vanished, replaced by sharp alarm. "Kevin," she snapped, voice trembling. "What is wrong with you? Why are you looking at him like that?" She shook his arm. "Kevin, answer me. You look like you've seen a ghost." Marcus's gaze finally landed on Kevin. It wasn't angry. It wasn't emotional. It was cold. Clinical. A man assessing a problem. Then he spoke. Kevin's response was a strangled gasp, barely audible. "Mr. Vance." What are you doing here?" His eyes darted from Marcus to me, desperate for salvation, for some miracle. Tasha's head whipped back and forth between her panicked husband and the calm, imposing figure beside me. "Mr. Vance," she repeated, voice sharp, brittle. "Kevin, who is this man? Why are you calling him, sir? What is going on?" Marcus didn't even glance at her. His icy gaze remained locked on Kevin. A single raised eyebrow, a gesture so simple yet devastating, conveyed absolute authority. "I am here with my wife, Imani," he said. Steady. Deep. Final. Like a judge's gavel striking the bench. He let the word wife linger in the cold air, displacing every insult Tasha had flung my way. Her mouth opened, then closed. No sound came out. Her entire world, the one she had carefully constructed for 9 years, was crumbling in real time. Marcus tilted his head slightly, as if trying to place a familiar, but ultimately unimportant, face. "Your price, aren't you?" he said. Not a question. A statement. Kevin Price. Atlanta Regional Sales Director. The blood drained from Tasha's face this time. "Sales Director," she whispered, barely audible. Her eyes snapped to Kevin, wide with dawning horror. "What is he talking about, Kevin?" Marcus's tone remained flat, indifferent, like a CEO reviewing a minor line item in a quarterly report. "I remember seeing your reports cross my desk," he said. "Your quarterly numbers, adequate." Adequate. Not a millionaire. Not a partner. Not a king. An adequate employee. Tasha, the golden child, the one who had built her identity on stealing my millionaire fiancé, was frozen. Her eyes stayed fixed on her husband, the man she had boasted about, the man she had imagined as a prize, and now, trembling in his $1,000 shoes, he was nothing more than an employee. Not a king, not a fortune, not a mansion. Just an employee. And that revelation? It handed me the world. The look of utter devastation on her face was one I had waited 9 long, painful years to witness. The funeral was over, but the reckoning, the real fight, was only beginning. The battle for our mother's estate loomed ahead, and I could feel its weight pressing down. We left the church in stunned silence. Tasha didn't speak, she simply grabbed Kevin's arm and practically dragged him to their car. The ride to our mother Brenda's house for the repast was a blur. Marcus held my hand, thumb rubbing small circles into my knuckles. No words were needed. The real war was yet to come. Brenda's house looked exactly as I remembered it, overstuffed furniture, the faint scent of old perfume mingling with fried chicken. The room buzzed with cousins, aunts, and church friends, all balancing paper plates on their laps. The moment Marcus and I entered, the chatter evaporated. Every eye landed on us, heavy with unspoken questions. Tasha and Kevin were huddled in the corner by the fireplace, trying desperately to appear normal. They looked like caged animals. Kevin's sweat glimmered under the soft light, and Tasha stared into her cup of punch as if it held the secrets of the universe. Humiliation radiated from her like heat. About 30 minutes of awkward, quiet condolences passed. Then Tasha decided she could no longer tolerate irrelevance. She needed control. She needed to be the center of attention. She stood abruptly, tapping a fork against her glass. Silence fell. "Excuse me, everyone," she began, voice artificially bright, painfully rehearsed. "I just want to thank you all for coming. It means so much to me, and my husband." She pointedly ignored Marcus and me. "As you all know, I was the one who was here for Mama in her final years," she continued, voice laced with faux devotion. "I took her to appointments, managed her affairs, held her hand. I felt Marcus tense behind me. He knew what I already knew. I had been sending money for our mother's care for years, money that Tasha and Kevin had clearly squandered." Tasha's smile widened, a sad, noble performance for her audience. "Mama and I were so close," she said, eyes glinting with calculated triumph, and she made her wishes very, very clear. She was so grateful for my devotion. That is why she explicitly told me she was leaving this house. She swept her arm out toward me. "To me, Imani. Not to you." Her eyes locked on mine, challenging, triumphant, daring me to respond. This was her moment, her grand victory lap after the church, the culmination of 9 years of careful scheming. She was putting me in my place in front of everyone, showing the room how unworthy I was. "You never appreciated her, Imani," Tasha began, voice dripping with self-righteousness, projecting to every corner of our mother's cramped living room. "You were too busy with your career, too busy trying to be something you're not. You never had time for her. I was the one here. The implication hung thick in the warm air. I was ungrateful. The selfish daughter. The one who abandoned her family, destined to receive nothing in return. Mama always knew you were ungrateful, Tasha continued, her voice rising, carrying to our aunts, cousins, and distant family friends. She knew you were selfish. That's why she never trusted you, Imani. She knew you would just sell this place off, or let it crumble. She swept her gaze across the room, seeking nods of agreement from those who had been fed her poison for years. Every word was a brick in the wall of her narrative, a story she had built carefully to justify her own devotion. Every word was a lie. Tasha puffed up her chest, savoring the grand finale. She turned to a nervous man sitting on the sofa in a conservative gray suit, Mr. Henderson, our mother's longtime family lawyer. Mama had made everything legal, of course. I gave everything to me, Tasha announced, waving her hand dismissively as if the formalities were trivial. She locked eyes with the lawyer, sharp and commanding. Isn't that right, Mr. Henderson? Go on. Tell them. Read the will. All eyes shifted to Mr. Henderson, a man in his late 60s who had handled our mother's taxes for 20 years. He looked profoundly uncomfortable. Tasha beamed, arms crossed, ready to bask in the glory she believed was hers. He cleared his throat and opened his briefcase, pulling out a single folder. But he didn't open it. Not yet. He stared at it as though willing it to disappear. Tasha, he began, voice low, not meeting her eyes, staring at the worn carpet instead. About your mother's wishes, yes, Tasha prompted sharply, voice brittle with impatience. Go on. Tell them what Mama wanted. Tell them how she left me the house. Mr. Henderson flinched, finally lifting his eyes, not to Tasha, but to me. Imani, he said, and my heart dropped. And Tasha, this is difficult. Difficult? Tasha snapped. Kevin, desperate, tried to take control. Just read the paper. My wife is the beneficiary. Let's get this unpleasantness over with. Well, Mr. Price, that's not entirely correct, Mr. Henderson replied, calm but firm. The room froze. Tasha's smile twitched. What? What is not correct? Of course it is. Mama promised me. Mr. Henderson inhaled deeply. MS. Tasha, it is true there is an older will, from about 9 years ago, in which your mother named you the primary beneficiary of this property. Tasha exhaled, triumphant, eyes flashing at me. See? I told you. She trusted me. Then Mr. Henderson's voice cut through her celebration like a knife. That will is almost irrelevant now. The reality hit like a sledgehammer. The will does not matter, Mr. Henderson said, voice flat, clinical, like a doctor delivering a death sentence. Because of your mother's financial situation. Tasha's smile froze. He finally looked her dead in the eye. Tasha, your mother, she took out a second mortgage on this house 5 years ago. And about 2 years ago, a third. She refinanced, pulled out every last cent of equity. This house is mortgaged to its absolute legal limit. A pin could have dropped. Our Aunt Mabel, halfway through raising a piece of chicken to her mouth, just froze midair. Mr. Henderson continued, his tone flat, deliberate, the calmest voice in a room on the brink of chaos. The fact is, Ms. Brenda, this house has no value. Completely underwater. The bank, not the estate, is the primary lien holder. Based on the outstanding loans, the property is scheduled for a foreclosure auction in 30 days. It is worthless. The estate is in considerable debt. Silence swallowed the room. Air, warmth, even sound itself seemed to vanish. Tasha stood rigid, her triumph peeling away like old wallpaper. Her face shifted from victorious pink to pallid white, then to a dark, furious red. What? She screamed, a guttural, animalistic roar, raw rage vibrating through every fiber of her being. What did you say? Her voice cracked into an unbearable shriek, high-pitched and ugly, echoing across the room. The force of it made Aunt Mabel drop her fork. "That is impossible. You are lying." Tasha stepped forward, hands clenched, knuckles white. "You are a senile old fool. Mama had a pension. She had Social Security. She had the money I sent her." I felt Marcus's hand at the small of my back, a silent, solid anchor. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just watched my sister, the golden child, finally face a problem her charm and beauty couldn't fix. "She was fine," Tasha continued, her voice rising to hysterical tears, pure rage spilling from her eyes. "Why would she mortgage this house? Why would she go into debt? For what?" Every eye in the room, cousins, aunts, uncles, church friends, shifted from her blotchy, furious face to the lawyer. Mr. Henderson looked as if he would rather be anywhere else on earth. He adjusted his tie, fiddled with the clasp on his briefcase. He glanced at me, then Marcus, and finally let his gaze settle like twin slabs of stone on Kevin Price. Kevin, who had been shrinking into the floral wallpaper, went rigid. Mr. Henderson spoke, voice low but cutting through the tension like a scalpel. "She did not have any personal debts, Tasha. The pension and Social Security were more than adequate for her daily needs." Tasha stomped her foot like a child. "Then why?" He didn't flinch. "She mortgaged the house to pay off the debts, the extensive, compounding, catastrophic debts of your husband, Kevin." The room had gone from tense to a tomb. The faint buzz of the old refrigerator in the kitchen was deafening in the silence. Kevin Price, the millionaire, the man, the grand prize Tasha had stolen, let out a small, choked wheeze. Blood drained from his face, leaving a clammy gray mask of pure terror. Sweat popped up visibly on his forehead. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Not a word. Tasha's mind, which had been racing at 1,000,000 miles per hour, finally froze. Her head turned slowly, mechanically, from Mr. Henderson to Kevin. Her carefully crafted empire, the story she had lived by for 9 years, was crumbling in real time. The pieces weren't adding up. It made no sense. It was a sentence in a language she could not understand. "Kevin," she whispered, small, trembling, almost a child's voice. "What is he talking about? Debts? What debts?" Kevin shook his head, a pathetic, jerky motion, eyes wide with panic. "Tasha," she turned to Mr. Henderson, voice desperate, fragile. "That is ridiculous. That is slander. My husband, he is a regional director. He is a millionaire. He doesn't have debts. He makes more money than everyone in this room combined." Mr. Henderson finally opened the folder, calm, unflinching. "That is not what the bank statements show, Tasha. For the last 3 years, your mother has been systematically draining the equity from this house to pay off online gambling sites, high-interest credit cards, and private unsecured lenders. All of them, in Mr. Price's name." Tasha's eyes widened, disbelief slowly dawning, as they finally fixed on the man she had stolen. "Kevin," she whispered, barely audible, pleading. "Tell me he is lying. Tell me this old fool is lying." But Kevin could not. He just stood there, exposed, trembling, drowning in the suffocating silence. The millionaire facade had crumbled. The man she had flaunted, the man she had built her life, and her identity, around, was a fraud. Tasha's face twisted into grotesque confusion. "Kevin," she whispered again, voice cracked and pleading. "Tell me he is lying. Tell them all they are lying." But there was nothing. He couldn't. He just stood there, a pathetic, trembling figure at the center of our mother's living room, stripped of everything. And I watched, feeling a cold, quiet clarity settle over me. It wasn't just the house. It was everything. The last 9 years of lies, the carefully constructed narrative, the illusion of grandeur, it was all built on a foundation of debt and deceit. The millionaire fiancé. The mansion she had bragged about. The flashy cars. The 10-carat diamond ring she had waved in my face at the church, the symbol of her triumph. All lies. A house of cards built on our mother's borrowed money. Kevin wasn't a high-flying executive. He was a sales director. Worse, he was a gambling addict. Suddenly, everything clicked. I understood the frantic, whispered phone calls between him and my mother, the ones that stopped abruptly whenever I walked in. I understood why my mother, frugal as she had always been, suddenly had no savings. He hadn't just borrowed money. He had systematically drained her, exploiting her trust and her blind faith in Tasha's perfect life. I could almost hear his smooth, manipulative voice from 9 years ago. "Brenda, let me invest that money for you. Let me grow your nest egg. Tasha and I will take care of you." He had preyed on her desire to believe Tasha had married a successful man. He had turned my mother's pride, ignorance, and favoritism into his personal ATM, funding his addiction while keeping up appearances. He hadn't lied to Tasha just about his career, he had lied about everything. Tasha's breathing became rapid, shallow, erratic. Her eyes darted from her sweating, terrified husband to the pitiless lawyer, to the silent faces of our family watching the scene unfold. In that single horrifying moment, the truth crashed down. Her carefully curated life, the image of the winner, the woman who had the man, the money, and the mansion, evaporated. She had nothing. Her marriage was a sham. Her wealth a fantasy. The man she had relied on, worshipped, and flaunted to the world was a liar and a thief who had bankrupted their own mother. And the 10-carat ring on her finger? Not a symbol of victory. A joke. A grim testament, probably purchased with the very money her mother had been forced to mortgage from the house she had loved. The color drained from Tasha's face. Her fists, once clenched in fury, went limp. Her blazing eyes dulled, vacant, terrified. She opened her mouth, and nothing came out. She crumpled to the floor, a complete collapse, folding in on herself like a paper doll, finally realizing that the life she had flaunted for 9 years was a sham. The woman who thought she owned everything now publicly understood she had absolutely nothing. I stood there, watching, and felt a strange, cold calm settle over me. Stunned, of course, but not by surprise. The scale of the deception, mortgaging our mother's house to the limit while pretending to be a millionaire, was breathtaking. A level of calculated sociopathy that might have made a lesser person collapse under shock. But I had seen a preview of this movie 9 years ago. And Kevin Price. That hollow-eyed panic. That sweating, pathetic fraud. That was the real him. The man I had thought I loved, the man I had trusted, was exactly what my instincts had never allowed me to fully accept. 9 years ago, I was 29. A data analyst, brilliant at my work. I saw patterns in human behavior others missed. While Tasha, the golden child, charmed and dazzled, I built my future quietly. I had created a complex predictive algorithm, my masterpiece, that could analyze consumer behavior and forecast market trends with near-perfect accuracy. I thought it was going to be our future. I was in love with Kevin Price, the charming, ambitious salesman who told me I was the smartest woman he had ever met. I shared everything with him. My code. My models. My vision. I told him this algorithm wasn't just a tool, it was a revolution. Our ticket to the top, he called it. A week before our wedding, I walked in on him rehearsing a presentation, my presentation. My algorithm, my work, my late-night brilliance, all repackaged with his name on the cover. And there she was, Tasha. My sister, who had mocked me endlessly for my boring computer job, coaching him on fonts, graphics, cadence, on how to sell my genius as his own. That algorithm became his foundation. His entry into Marcus Vance's company. His entire career, the millionaire facade, the mansion, the flashy cars, even the diamond ring Tasha flaunted, built on my work, stolen and polished by the people I trusted most. 9 years of climbing, of pretending that I hadn't seen the truth. And when I confronted them, it wasn't just the betrayal that hurt. It was my mother's reaction. The woman who had raised me, guided me, supposedly loved me, looked at me with weary disappointment. "Imani," she said, voice tight with frustration, "you pushed him away. All those late nights at the computer, you don't know how to keep a man. You need to be more like Tasha." I had poured everything into my work. Into my mind. into my future. And it had been dismissed. My brilliance, my ambition, my late nights in a cold apartment, all branded as unworthy, unfeminine. And now, here we were. Tasha, the golden child, crumpled on the floor, her perfect illusion shredded. Kevin, the man my mother had idolized, exposed as a broke, pathetic gambling addict. And me, the so-called career-obsessed daughter, standing in the ruins, finally seeing it all with icy clarity. The world had misjudged me for my intellect, for my focus, for my ambition. But tonight, watching the golden child fall, I knew the truth. It was never about being feminine or flashy. It was about substance. And I had it in spades. The one thing my mother had despised, my intellect, my independence, my analytical mind, was the very thing that had given me the strength to see the truth. And, in the most unexpected way, it had led me straight to Marcus. I looked at the wreckage in front of me, my sister crumpled on the floor, her husband trembling beside her, and my mother watching in stunned silence as the lie she had protected all her life tore itself apart in front of her entire family. The room felt like a vacuum, every sound, every breath sucked out of the air. Tasha was just a heap of glitter and silk on the floor, her perfect world collapsing around her. For a fleeting second, I almost pitied her. I thought she was broken. I was wrong. Her head snapped up. Her eyes, no longer vacant, burned with a new, feral kind of fire. The hatred that flared there was raw, desperate, and poisonous. She wasn't looking at Kevin anymore. Or the lawyer. She was looking straight at me. You. The word sliced through the silence like a knife. You, she hissed again, pushing herself up, her body jerky, unsteady. The beautiful, polished Tasha was gone. What stood in her place was something wild, a creature cornered and dangerous. You did this, she shrieked, pointing a trembling hand at me, the 10-carat lie on her finger catching the light in one pathetic flash. You came here to ruin me. You were always jealous. You couldn't stand it, that I had everything and you had nothing. I didn't move. Marcus's hand was still at my back, calm, steady, but I didn't need it. I was perfectly still, perfectly cold. You, she spat, taking a staggering step closer. You talked to that old fool Henderson. You dug this all up, didn't you? You wanted this. You wanted to humiliate me in front of everyone. You wanted to destroy my life because I got Kevin and you didn't. There it was, the same script she had always followed. Tasha, the eternal victim. The golden child who could never, ever be wrong. Around us, our aunts and cousins sat frozen, wide-eyed, watching the family goddess unravel. Look at you, she screamed, gesturing wildly at me. Standing there, acting so high and mighty, you're just a pathetic, lonely little IT geek. That's all you've ever been. A bitter woman hiding behind her stupid computer. Her voice cracked, but she didn't stop. Her fury was feeding on itself now, spiraling. Then she swung toward Marcus, her expression twisting into something vicious. And him, she sneered, waving at him with a trembling hand. Where did you get him, huh? How does a washed-up 38-year-old nobody like you land a CEO? She didn't even wait for an answer. Her eyes went wide, manic, triumphant, as her mind twisted into the ugliest conclusion it could find. Oh my God, she breathed, her voice dripping with theatrical disgust. You're a gold digger. That's it, isn't it? You found out he was Kevin's boss. You found out he was rich. She took one more step closer, close enough that I could smell the champagne on her breath. Her voice dropped to a venomous whisper, but loud enough for the entire room to hear. You slept with him, didn't you? A collective gasp rippled through the room. You slept with my husband's boss, she spat, every word trembling with poison. You did it to get revenge on me. That's what this is. You sold yourself just to ruin my life. And there it was, the final act. The last desperate, filthy card in her deck. The room stayed frozen. And Tasha's words hung in the air, thick, sticky, and toxic. The room was a held breath. Faces caught between Tasha's hysterical certainty and my utter calm. Marcus tensed beside me, his jaw set, protective heat radiating off him. He took a half step forward, ready to shut her down with force. I placed my hand on his chest, gentle, firm, and gave a nearly invisible shake of my head. "I got this," I whispered. This was my fight. It always had been. Tasha was still heaving, flushed with the high of her own story. "A gold digger," she hissed, incredulous. My voice was low, measured, and it cut through the room like cold steel. "You really think, after all this time, that that's all I am capable of?" A dry laugh escaped me, only for a second. "Tasha, I am not a pathetic little IT geek. I haven't been one for a very, very long time. In fact, I never really was." Confusion flickered over her face, then anger, then a blank incomprehension. "What are you talking about?" she demanded. "Mama said you just worked with computers." Mama never understood what I did. I had never corrected her. I had let them all believe I was small. It was convenient. It kept them comfortable. I stepped forward. "For the past 7 years," I said, calm and precise, "I have not been an employee. I have been a founder. I run a cybersecurity consultancy I built from nothing with the last $1,000 I had after you and Kevin destroyed my life." The room tightened. Kevin's face went gray. "While you were playing Millionaire's wife," I continued, "I was building a reputation. Massive companies hire my team to find vulnerabilities before criminals do. They pay us 6- and 7-figure retainers to protect their networks. I am an ethical hacker, Tasha. One of the best in the country." Tasha's face was a mask of disbelief. She couldn't parse it. "It was not a date," I said, softening into the explanation as if to a child. 3 years ago, Marcus's corporation hired my firm on a 7-figure engagement. I led a red team operation to test their global defenses. For 3 months I did the job I do, I found their holes. I owned their network. Deep inside their accounting servers, under layers of false authorizations, I found the biggest vulnerability of all. I let my gaze fall to the sweating man at the edge of the room. Kevin made a small strangled sound. Tasha's confusion deepened. "What about Kevin?" she demanded. "I found a sophisticated pattern of embezzlement," I said, clinical, detached. "Faked sales numbers. Hundreds of thousands moved into offshore accounts that match the payment schedules for high-stakes gambling sites. Your Millionaire, he's a common thief, and his activity was about to collapse the Atlanta branch." I let that sink in, watched the color drain from people's faces. I presented my findings directly to the CEO, Marcus Vance. I looked to Marcus, he gave a small, proud smile. Imagine his surprise when the investigator's name on the confidential report was Imani Washington. The executive I flagged for massive fraud? Kevin Price. I let the words sit like a verdict. He recognized both our names instantly. He wasn't impressed because I was pretty, Tasha. I said the word back to her, hard. He was impressed because the analytic model I used to catch Kevin was the same algorithm he stole from me 9 years ago. Only now it wasn't just an idea, it was a weapon. And I was pointing it right at the man who stole it. We hadn't fallen for each other on a date, we'd fallen into the same war. Not over dinner, but under fluorescent lights, buried in stacks of evidence, tracing every dollar your husband stole from Marcus's company, and every cent he stole from our mother. Night after night, it wasn't a bedroom that held us together, it was a boardroom. It wasn't champagne, it was cold coffee and the quiet click of a hard drive unlocking one more lie. And somewhere in those encrypted files, in the silence between 2 exhausted breaths, we fell in love. Not over revenge. Not over money. We fell in love over something rarer, respect. Something you and Kevin, I said, gesturing to him, would not understand in 1,000 lifetimes. I took a long breath. My body felt light, almost empty. 9 years of silence had just ended. So no, Tasha, I said quietly. I am not a gold digger. I did not sleep with my husband's boss. I am his colleague. His partner. And for the last 3 years, I've been carefully, legally, and brilliantly building the prison cell your husband is about to live in. The room froze. Only the rain spoke, hammering the windows like applause from another world. My words hung there. I am the woman who built your husband's prison cell, cold, metallic, irreversible. Tasha and Kevin were statues, but made of very different stone. Kevin's strings had been cut. The sweat that had once shimmered on his forehead now ran in trembling rivers. His eyes, wide, empty, stared at the floor. He wasn't thinking about the house anymore, or Tasha, or the life he'd built on lies. He was thinking about a federal courtroom. About bars. About the sound of a door locking behind him. Tasha, though, she was still fighting the realization. Her mind, that sharp little machine of self-preservation, whirred and sparked, searching for an angle, a new lie to crawl into. Her eyes darted, Kevin. Marcus. Me. And then, there it was. The click. The final, awful understanding. It wasn't just the house. It wasn't just the money. It wasn't just that Kevin was a fraud. It was that Kevin was a criminal, and I had the proof. All of it. The mansion, the jewelry, the image, everything was about to be seized. Her world wasn't just falling apart, it was being federally dismantled. Her arrogance, that glittering armor she'd worn her entire life, didn't crack. It shattered. And what was left beneath wasn't strength. It was fear. Her face, once beautiful in its cruelty, crumpled. Her lip trembled. And then came the sound, low, guttural, and horrifyingly human. No, she whispered. No, no, no. Then, she did something I thought was physically impossible. She moved. Her designer heels slipped against our mother's old rug as she stumbled toward me. She didn't just walk, she ran. And then, right there, at my feet, Tasha, my sister, the golden child, the untouchable one, fell to her knees. Her hands clawed at my dress, her 10-carat diamond scraping against my skin. Her mascara streamed in black rivers down her cheeks. Her pride was gone. Her beauty was gone. All that was left was a trembling, desperate creature begging for air. She grabbed my hands, icy, shaking, and for the first time, the tears on her face were real. Imani, she sobbed, voice breaking, stripped of all performance. Please, please, I'm begging you. Don't let him do this. Her head bowed, eyes wild, makeup smeared into something almost inhuman. He'll fire Kevin, she gasped. He'll fire him and he'll go to jail and we'll lose everything, the house, the car, the ring. Imani, everything, she sobbed. We'll have nothing. Please. And then, when the last mask had fallen, she played her final card, the one she knew had always been my weakness. Please, Imani, for Mama. For her memory. Don't do this. She wouldn't want this. She would want us to be a family. Please, for Mom. There it was, the last shield. The same fragile shield our mother had always used to protect Tasha from consequences. The same tired excuse she'd used to justify their betrayal. Now Tasha was holding up our mother's memory like a trembling hand against a firing squad, hoping it would stop the bullet I'd been carrying for 9 long years. And then, as if her plea had cracked open the silence, Kevin found his voice. He lurched forward, pale and shaking, his hands raised in a pathetic gesture of surrender. She's right, Imani, he croaked. His voice was thin, a ghost of the confident millionaire who used to hold court at the church. Please, for Brenda's sake. She wouldn't want this. His eyes darted desperately between my frozen face and Marcus's unflinching stillness. Imani, I know I made mistakes, he stammered. 9 years ago, I was wrong. I was so wrong. But you have to understand, he paused, hunting for a lifeline, an excuse that might still buy him mercy. I just loved Tasha so much. I wasn't thinking. I did it for her. It was almost laughable, the cowardice of it. Not love. Not madness. Not impulse. A choice. Cold. Calculated. Criminal. He hadn't made a mistake. he had engineered a fraud against me, against his company, against our mother. And even now, at the bitter end, he was still hiding behind Tasha, still blaming his sins on a love as counterfeit as his accounts. I looked down at them, my sister, still kneeling at my feet, her tears soaking into my dress, and Kevin, trembling beside her like a marionette with its strings half cut. They were perfect for each other, two parasites clinging to the same dying host, using my mother's memory as their final, desperate disguise. Tasha's hands were ice against my skin. Her tears, hot, heavy, mixed with mascara and guilt, streaking black across my fingers. "For Mama's sake," she whispered again, her voice cracking. "For Mama," Kevin nodded quickly, his face ashen. "For Brenda," he echoed, as if the name itself could conjure mercy. "For Mama." That phrase, that ancient shield she had carried all her life, hung between us like a curse. And then, something inside me shifted. All the grief I had ever felt for my mother, every ounce of loss and longing, was consumed by something colder. Sharper. Final. "For Mama," I thought. The same Mama who watched you steal my fiancé and then blamed me. The same Mama who said my career was unfeminine, who smiled at your lies because they were prettier than my truth. The same Mama who answered my broken, heart-shattered call and told me I didn't know how to keep a man. She hadn't just enabled you. She'd chosen you. She'd chosen the lie. And now, at the very end, you were trying to use that same lie to save yourself. Pathetic. Slowly, deliberately, I pulled my hands free from her grasp, from her claws, from her tears, from her history. And for the first time in my life, I felt absolutely, terrifyingly free. The moment my hand slipped from hers, she flinched, as if that simple loss of contact had severed her last thread to safety. Her tear-glazed eyes lifted to mine, wide and glimmering with a new, raw panic. The begging wasn't working anymore. I looked down at her and felt nothing that resembled anger. The fire that had fueled me for 9 years, white-hot, relentless, was gone. What replaced it was colder. Denser. Pity. A deep, surgical pity. The kind that cut cleaner than rage ever could. She wasn't my rival anymore. She wasn't even a monster. She was just a fragile, hollow woman whose life, built on deceit, was finally collapsing under its own rot. "You're begging me," I said softly, my voice slicing through the silence like glass. "You're begging me not to tell my husband. Not to tell Marcus." "Yes," she gasped, nodding desperately. "Yes, Imani, please, don't tell him. He'll ruin us." "Don't tell," I almost smiled. The irony was almost beautiful. Even now, she was still playing a game that had ended years ago. I looked down at her, on her knees, surrounded by the ghosts of our mother's house, a broken queen, ruling over a crumbling, counterfeit kingdom. "Tell him?" I echoed, my voice laced with the faintest trace of confusion, colder than any anger could ever be. "Tasha, why would I need to tell him now?" The words drifted out between us, quiet and merciless. I let the silence bloom, watching as her hopeful sobs turned rigid, her face freezing mid-plea. "I already told him," I said. The sound that came from her wasn't a sob. It was a gasp, sharp, guttural, like the air had been punched out of her chest. Her whole body went still. The shaking stopped. The tears stopped. She stayed there, kneeling before me, hands frozen mid-clutch, her face tilted up in disbelief. Her eyes, wide and streaked with black, locked on mine. 3 years, she whispered. The words were barely sound at all, just breath and shock, bleeding into the heavy quiet. The fury was gone. The pride was gone. What remained was pure confusion, childlike, hollow, terrified. In Tasha's world, everything was transactional, predictable. If you were caught, you were punished. If you lied, you paid. Actions. Consequences. Simple. But this was a language she had never learned. A move that didn't exist on her board. Her head turned slowly, like an old machine creaking to life, to look at Kevin. And Kevin, poor, pale Kevin, stood there like a corpse that hadn't yet realized it was dead. Not speaking. Not denying. His silence was a confession. The loudest one in the room. He had known. He had known for 3 years that I knew. Tasha's eyes whipped back to me, wild and unfocused, her confusion boiling into a new, raw hysteria. This wasn't the panic of guilt. It was the panic of someone who no longer understood the rules of her own reality. No, she rasped. Her voice clawed its way up from her throat, trembling, then rising, desperate to rebuild its old authority. No, you're lying. You're lying again. You always lie. She tried to stand, but her legs wouldn't obey. She was still trapped there, on her knees, a prisoner of her own unraveling dignity. If you told him, she choked out, her voice climbing, frantic, trying to pull the room back to her side, if you told him 3 years ago, he would have fired Kevin. He would have been arrested. We would have known. Her gaze darted wildly across the room, seeking a single nod, a single ally, a single aunt or cousin who would back the story she was trying to rebuild out of ash. See, her voice cracked. She's making it up. She's just trying to scare us. But no one spoke. No one moved. Every face in the room was turned toward her, not with belief, not even with anger, but with the quiet, stunned recognition that the golden child had finally run out of lies. The silence in that room was suffocating. Not just quiet, dense. It pressed down like a wet wool blanket, thick with judgment and disbelief. And under that crushing stillness, the last fragile thread of Tasha's self-assurance finally snapped. Her voice fell, small again, stripped of its arrogance, back to that trembling, terrified whisper. She wasn't talking to the room anymore. She was talking to herself. 3 years ago, she murmured, her eyes darting, unfocused. But, that's not possible. That doesn't make sense. I could see her mind breaking apart, her frantic, narcissistic brain spinning through the impossible arithmetic. 3 years. 3 years of her perfect, polished, brag-worthy life, the one she'd shoved in my face at the church, and suddenly none of it added up. Kevin, she stammered, turning toward the hollow shell of her husband. Kevin got a promotion. 2 years ago. Her voice shook as her thoughts tripped over each other. He won that sales award, the chairman's circle. We went to Cabo. On the company trip. She was unraveling fast now, the words tumbling out like marbles spilling downstairs. He got a raise, she gasped. A big one. We bought the new Escalade, he said it was his bonus. And then, finally, her wide, frantic eyes found mine. But not for long. Because she realized, slowly, terribly, that I wasn't the one who could answer her questions. So she turned her gaze upward, past me, to him. To Marcus. Her voice rose to a jagged, broken shriek. Why, she screamed, the words splitting the silence like lightning. If you knew, why would you let him keep working? Why would you keep a thief in your company? Why would you let him stay for 3 whole years? Her voice was spiraling now, hysterical, desperate for some logic that might save her. You didn't just let him stay, she cried. You promoted him. You gave him money. You gave him awards. Why? Why would you do that? Her words echoed through the heavy air, bouncing off the walls and landing in the paralyzed stares of our aunts and cousins. Every single person in that room was thinking the same thing. Why would a man like Marcus, a man with that kind of power, that kind of wealth, reward a thief? Kevin Price stood there like a man awaiting execution. Pale. Trembling. Waiting for the sentence he already knew was coming. And then Marcus, who had been silent, motionless, a granite statue of restraint beside me, finally moved. He turned his head. Slowly. Deliberately. He didn't look angry. He didn't raise his voice. He simply fixed that cold, unblinking gaze on Kevin Price. When he spoke, his voice was calm, deep, measured, and terrifyingly even. You're asking, Marcus began, his tone almost polite, why I would continue to employ a man I knew was committing fraud. Why I would give him awards. Bonuses. Trips to Cabo. He let each question hang in the air, letting them taste their own absurdity. Letting Tasha and Kevin feel how utterly powerless they were in the story he had been writing for 3 years. "It's quite simple, Ms. Tasha," he said, his tone as flat as a blade. "A thief who knows he's being watched stops stealing. He hides. He deletes files. He runs." He paused. The silence stretched, taut and electric. "But a thief who thinks he's clever," Marcus's eyes flicked to Kevin, sharp as a scalpel. "A thief who thinks he's smarter than everyone else, that kind of thief gets sloppy. He gets comfortable. He brags. He buys Escalades. He leaves a trail so wide a child could follow it." The words landed like hammer blows. Kevin flinched with each one. "All we had to do," Marcus finished, "was give him more rope." Then he turned slightly, just enough to look at me. For a single moment, the frost in his eyes thawed. What replaced it wasn't anger, or even triumph, it was pride. Deep. Quiet. Fierce. The kind of pride that steadied my heartbeat and made the last 9 years worth every scar. Then, just as quickly, he turned back to the room. The steel mask dropped back into place. "I kept him employed," Marcus said, his voice lowering to something colder than ice. "I promoted him. I gave him bonuses, for one reason, and one reason only." He paused, letting the silence stretch until every soul in that room leaned forward, breath held, waiting for the next word to fall. "Because my wife," Marcus said at last, and the word wife landed like a thunderclap. A word that, not an hour ago, Tasha had mocked. My wife, who, as you now know, founded the cybersecurity firm that first caught him, and who, for the last 2 years, has been serving, quietly, as my head of global risk assessment. The air left the room. Tasha's mouth fell open. "Head of, what?" she whispered, the title tumbling clumsily off her tongue. Marcus didn't even glance at her. His voice, when it came, was colder than a closing vault door. "She was the one who asked me not to fire him. She was the one who told me to keep him exactly where he was." He paused, his gaze slicing through the space between Kevin and Tasha. "She wanted to watch." If the room had been quiet before, now it was deathly still, the kind of stillness that makes you hear your own pulse. "Head of Global Risk Assessment," Tasha repeated, dazed. The words meant nothing to her. To her, it was just another layer of meaningless corporate jargon. She couldn't begin to comprehend that the same pathetic IT geek she'd sneered at her whole life was now one of the most powerful people in her husband's empire. Marcus didn't bother explaining. He just kept going, his voice smooth, deliberate, the voice of a man who was dismantling someone, piece by piece. "She kept you in place, Price," he said, eyes locking on Kevin, who looked gray, trembling, already halfway erased. "Because your fraud wasn't a single mistake. It wasn't just the algorithm you stole 9 years ago. It wasn't just the money you embezzled from my company 3 years ago. And it wasn't just the cash you siphoned from your mother-in-law's account." He took one slow step forward. "My wife wanted to see how deep it went. She believed, correctly, that a man this arrogant, this greedy, would never stop at one crime. That he was stealing not just from me, but from our clients." Kevin made a low, strangled sound, the sound of a man realizing there was no escape left to find. "And she was right," Marcus said. "The promotion was bait. The bonus was a lure. The Cabo trip, a reward." His voice sharpened. "We gave you more rope, Price. A bigger budget. More clients. More opportunities. And exactly as she predicted, you took them all." He turned to the stunned faces surrounding him. "She wanted to watch," he said again, every syllable deliberate. "She wanted to watch as you built your own prison. Every forged signature. Every false report. Every stolen dollar, all neatly archived, time-stamped, recorded. You weren't climbing a ladder, Kevin. You were digging your own grave." Marcus's gaze swept the room. "This was never just a family matter," he said. "My wife was protecting my company. Our shareholders. Our clients. She was doing her job. Then he turned back to Tasha, still kneeling, frozen in horror, and to Kevin, whose legs looked ready to give way. For the past 2 years, Marcus said, his voice dropping to a low, deliberate rumble, the person leading the internal investigation against you was my head of global risk assessment, my wife. Every email you sent, every call you made, every fabricated expense report, every offshore account, she saw it all. Logged. Recorded. Handed straight to the FBI. He let the words hang, each one landing like a blow. Your entire millionaire career, Kevin, Marcus said at last, was a meticulously crafted sting operation. And Imani, he turned to me, his expression softening just for a heartbeat, ran it flawlessly. The line hit the center of the room like an earthquake. She wanted to watch. It echoed in everyone's mind, not as cruelty, but as power. Tasha was still on her knees. Her eyes, red and dazed, lifted toward me, her mind shattered, her words breaking into fragments. Head of Global Risk Assessment, she murmured. The title was still meaningless to her, a sound without substance. She was trying, and failing, to fit the image of the awkward IT girl she'd once mocked into this new reality, and her brain simply couldn't compute. But Kevin understood. Oh, he understood perfectly. The wild, trembling panic that had been shaking through him moments before began to settle, not into calm, but into something far worse, a slow, suffocating dread. His eyes had gone empty. His face, pale and slick with sweat, looked like it had already given up. He knew. He finally knew. He wasn't just caught by his boss. He had been hunted by his past, by me. Marcus had delivered the corporate sentence. Now it was time for the personal one. I slipped my hand from his. I didn't need the comfort anymore. I had been waiting for this moment for 3 long, deliberate years. I walked forward, past Tasha's kneeling form, her sobs nothing more than background noise, until I stood in front of the man who had stolen my life. I was close enough to see the sheen of sweat on his temples. Close enough to see the tremor in his throat when he swallowed. Close enough that he could see it, the absolute lack of pity in my eyes. You were proud of that promotion, weren't you, Kevin? I said softly. My voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was quiet, intimate, the tone you use when sharing a secret. Which made it 1,000 times more devastating. And that Chairman's Circle Award, I continued. Tasha couldn't stop bragging about it. The trip to Cabo. The new Escalade. You really thought you were winning, didn't you? He didn't answer. He couldn't. His lips moved, but only a small choking sound came out. You thought you were so smart, I said, my voice steady, almost gentle. You thought you could steal my work, build a career on it, then steal from the man who hired you, and no one would ever notice. You thought I was still that heartbroken little IT geek you left behind. He flinched at that. Good. Let me tell you something about your brilliant career, Kevin. I leaned in slightly, forcing his eyes to meet mine. The last 2 years of your millionaire life? Every dollar, every accolade, all of it was a lie. My lie. A trap I built for you. And you walked right into it. I watched it hit him, the dawning horror, the realization that every success he'd celebrated had been scripted by the woman he betrayed. That promotion? I said quietly. My decision. I needed you close to bigger accounts. The bonus? My authorization. I wanted to see how greedy you'd get before you tripped the wire. And that Chairman's Circle Award, I let myself smile, cold and razor sharp, that was my favorite part. I approved it personally, just so I could watch you stand on stage in Cabo, holding your little trophy, while I sat in a federal meeting finalizing your case file. A strangled sound burst from Tasha, half sob, half gag. I didn't even look at her. Every fake report you filed, Kevin. Every inflated number, every fabricated expense, it all passed through my department for verification. Every single one. I took a step closer. Every night, my husband and I sat together, reviewing your work, approving your lies. And every time you clicked submit, you weren't sending a report. I leaned in. You were sending a confession. He blinked. His whole body was trembling now. For 2 years, I said, you were reporting directly to the woman you thought you'd destroyed. And the best part, Kevin? I tilted my head. You never even knew. The truth settled over the room like falling ash, heavy, final. I stood there, no longer the betrayed analyst he had left behind, but the architect of his ruin. Kevin swayed on his feet, his skin the color of wax, his arrogance stripped to bone. The man who once smirked through every lie was gone, replaced by something hollow, something small. Tasha, still on the floor, was staring up at him, her lips trembling. No, she whispered hoarsely. No, he's not, you're not, you didn't, she couldn't even finish. The words crumbled in her throat. Marcus, who had been watching quietly, finally stepped forward. The pride in his eyes was unmistakable, but so was the shift. The husband faded. The CEO emerged. He didn't look at Tasha. He didn't look at Kevin. He reached calmly into his suit jacket, pulled out his phone, and unlocked it with a quiet click. Price, he said, his voice now sharp, official, the sound of a verdict being read. Marcus's voice cut through the stunned silence like a scalpel. The internal investigation my wife has been leading, he said evenly, was concluded 72 hours ago. The findings were presented to our board, and then, he glanced down at his phone, almost bored, handed over to the authorities. A strangled, animal-like sound came from Tasha. It wasn't even a word, just raw, instinctive fear clawing its way out of her throat. Marcus didn't pause. Our corporate legal team, he continued, along with 2 detectives from the Atlanta Police Department's Fraud Division, are currently en route to this address. They'd like to have a word with you, Mr. Price, about wire fraud, bank fraud, and, he scrolled casually, as if reading a grocery list. Ah yes. Large-scale embezzlement. Kevin didn't fall. He folded. His legs simply gave out, boneless, and he hit the floor with a dull, final thud, a $1,000 suit collapsing into nothing. Tasha didn't move. She just stared at him, the man who had stolen everything she thought was hers. Her mouth hung open. Her eyes were vacant. She didn't scream. Didn't cry. Didn't even blink. She was marble now, frozen, hollow, ruined. Her diamond ring, 10 carats of bragging rights, gleamed faintly against the cheap carpet of the house she had just lost. The trap hadn't merely been sprung. It had snapped shut. Kevin lay motionless, a heap of failure and fine fabric. Marcus was already on his phone, his tone clipped and official as he began reporting the situation. The room itself seemed to hold its breath, no one daring to speak, to move, to even exist too loudly. And then came the sound. A low, feral growl, rising from somewhere deep in Tasha's chest. Not a sob, not grief, but the ugly, primal noise of something cornered. Her head jerked up. Her eyes, once glassy and blank, now blazed with one last, pathetic spark of madness. She wasn't looking at Kevin. She wasn't even looking at the faint red and blue lights that had begun flashing outside the window. She was looking at me. The house, she shrieked, her voice cracked, wild, almost inhuman. The house, you can't, it was Mama's. You can't take the house. She scrambled to her feet, pointing a shaking finger, not at me, but at poor Mr. Henderson, the lawyer who'd gone pale in his seat. He lied, she screamed, stabbing her finger toward Kevin's crumpled body. He lied, but the house is mine. Mama left it to me. You can't have it, Imani. You can't take my house. Her voice cracked into a sobbing wail, the last illusion of a dethroned queen still clinging to her crown. I didn't answer right away. I walked calmly to the sideboard, where my mother's crystal glasses still sat, glittering in the dim light. I poured a glass of water. My hand didn't shake. I took a slow sip, it was cold, sharp, cleansing. Then I turned back to her. Tasha, I said quietly, my tone flat, almost gentle. I'm not taking the house. I don't want this house. Her face flickered, confusion cutting through the madness. The bank is taking the house, I said simply. Mr. Henderson gave a small, miserable nod. It's mortgaged to the limit, I continued. It's worthless. The foreclosure's already scheduled. It's gone, Tasha. You lost it the moment you let that man, I glanced at Kevin's crumpled form, sign your mother's loans. Her lips trembled. The bank, she whispered, like the word itself had weight. And then the truth hit, hard. Her breath came in shallow bursts. She wasn't just losing her husband. She was losing everything. No, she whispered, shaking her head. I looked at her, and felt no pity. Only a cool, precise justice. You're right, I said. The bank was taking it. She blinked, confused, her tear-streaked face twitching. What do you mean? The bank sold the debt, I said. My voice was calm, measured, surgical. All of it. The second mortgage. The third. The high-interest lines of credit. It was quite a messy portfolio. And I let the words hang there, heavy, deliberate, as the last tiny piece of her illusion began to crumble. The bank had been only too happy to wash its hands of the mess. They sold the entire portfolio this morning, one neat, desperate transaction. Tasha just stared, her mind unable to connect the dots. I set my glass down carefully. By the way, Tasha, I said softly, my husband and I, through our private family trust, were the buyers. Her breath caught mid-inhale. What? What are you? I didn't let her finish. I'm the new owner of that debt, Tasha. I'm the one you owe. The lien holder. The one scheduling your foreclosure. The silence that followed was absolute. I could almost hear the sound of her world collapsing, one brick at a time. Her. The golden child. The favorite. The one who had everything. Now she owed me, the scapegoat, nearly $300,000. You were so worried about me taking the house, I said quietly. You should have worried about the fact that you now owe me personally. She made a small choking sound, half gasp, half sob. I glanced at my watch. The police are at the door, I said, nodding toward Kevin's crumpled form. They're here for him. And as the new owner of this property's debt, I'm officially serving you notice. I'm not extending the loan. I'm not offering a refinance. Marcus stepped beside me, his hand resting gently on my back as I walked toward the door. You have 48 hours to get out, I said. The words hung in the thick, burning silence like smoke. Tasha didn't move. Kevin didn't even lift his head. Then, a sound. A firm, heavy knock at the front door. Not a question. A statement. Tasha jolted, her whole body flinching like she'd been struck. Marcus opened the door. 2 Atlanta police officers stood in the rain, their caps dripping, their faces grave. We're here for a Mr. Kevin Price, the lead officer said. His voice was a low, official rumble that seemed to echo through the entire house. That sentence, we're here for Mr. Kevin Price, was the last domino to fall. The room shifted. Our family, the aunts, uncles, cousins, church friends, all stepped back. Not one of them moved to defend Tasha. Not one reached for Kevin. They recoiled, forming a cold, silent circle around the ruins of what had once been their golden couple. It was not pity. It was judgment. Mr. Price, the officer repeated, stepping forward, one hand resting on his belt. Kevin, the millionaire, the chairman's circle winner, the man Tasha had traded everything for, didn't fight. He didn't even speak. He just raised his hands behind his back like a puppet whose strings had been cut. The metallic click of the cuffs, click, click, rang sharp against the floral wallpaper. They lifted him to his feet. He didn't look at her. He didn't look at me. He just let them lead him out, past the condolence cards, past my mother's photographs, and into the storm of blue and red light outside. Tasha didn't follow him. She didn't scream. She didn't even blink. When the cuffs closed, something inside her simply broke. She folded where she stood, collapsing into a heap on the carpet, her ridiculous fur coat bunched around her, the hem soaking in a sticky puddle of spilled punch. She sat there staring at the empty space her husband had occupied, a woman stripped bare of everything, the house, the money, the marriage, the illusion. And then, perhaps worst of all, she lost her audience. Everyone turned away. The flashing red and blue lights bled across the living room walls before sliding away down the street, taking Kevin Price, and every lie he'd built, with them. What followed was silence. Not the gentle kind, but the heavy, absolute quiet that settles after something has died. Our family, our aunts, cousins, all those who had been frozen in stunned disbelief, began to move. One by one, they gathered their coats and purses, avoiding eye contact, their faces pale with shame. No one spoke. No one dared. They just left, drifting out into the night like ghosts abandoning a haunted house. And there she was. Tasha. Still on the floor, still in that ruined fur coat, the once proud queen reduced to a statue of wreckage. For the first time in her life, she was truly, completely alone. The legal storm came fast. The federal case Marcus and I had spent 3 years assembling was airtight. There would be no courtroom theatrics, no grand speeches, no chance for him to charm his way out. Faced with irrefutable evidence of wire fraud, bank fraud, and large-scale embezzlement, Kevin took a plea. 12 years. A federal penitentiary. No appeals, no mercy. And Tasha, she wasn't charged as a criminal, but the civil courts didn't spare her. She was named in every asset forfeiture. The mansion they bragged about, leased. Terminated. The Escalade, repossessed. The 10-carat diamond ring, her beloved trophy, the proof of her victory over me, gone. She sold it for a fraction of its worth just to pay the lawyers who kept her out of prison, and to begin paying the enormous debt she now owed me for my mother's house. When it was all over, she had nothing. No husband. No house. No money. And no family left to manipulate. The golden child had finally fallen to earth, alone, stripped bare, standing in the same cold, empty square where I'd been exiled years ago. Marcus placed his hand on my back, and together we turned away. We stepped past the stunned faces still lingering in the hall and out into the night. The air was cold, clean, November air. The street shimmered under the police lights, slick with rain. I could hear the muffled voices of the officers speaking to Kevin as they loaded him into the car. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Marcus reached for my hand. He didn't say a word, just gave it a quiet, steady squeeze. It said everything. We got into our car. For a long while, the only sound was the slow, rhythmic thud-thud-thud of the windshield wipers sweeping away the rain. And then, finally, I exhaled. A breath I'd been holding for 9 long years. But it wasn't triumph that filled me. Not joy. Not vengeance. It was relief. For 9 years, I'd carried a weight that was never mine. The shame of Kevin's betrayal. The sting of Tasha's cruelty. The ache of my mother's silent disapproval, the way she had chosen the golden child, the liar, the manipulator, over me. She had nurtured that lie. She had watered the soil that let Tasha's arrogance and Kevin's deceit grow, strangling everything true around them. So no, what happened tonight wasn't revenge. It was correction. Necessary. Painful. Long overdue. It was the messy, public ending of a lie my family had worshipped for years. The curse we all pretended wasn't real. The curse of favoritism. Of false appearances. Of choosing comfort over truth. And tonight, by standing in that truth, by refusing to carry their shame one moment longer, I had broken it. I had broken the generational curse. For the first time in my life, I was free. 6 months passed, not in a blur, but in calm, deliberate motion. The chaos of that day at my mother's house faded into quiet memory. The legal battles ended. And for the first time in 9 years, the world felt still. I stood in my office, our office. Marcus was beside me, his hand resting lightly against my back. We weren't talking. We didn't need to. We were simply looking at the wall in front of us. There, hanging in a clean black frame, was not a photograph or a painting, but a patent. My patent. The official, registered United States patent for the algorithm I created, the work Kevin had stolen, the work my mother once dismissed as a silly, unfeminine career. The same work that had once cost me everything, had now become the foundation of my freedom. It wasn't just a piece of paper. It was proof. Proof that truth endures longer than deceit ever can. That patent is now the cornerstone of our new joint venture, a thriving division of the company I built, the company I now lead as head of global risk. I think about Tasha sometimes. About that day. She was right about one thing, she did get the man. She got the glossy, hollow prize she'd chased her whole life. But I got something far rarer. I got a partner. A man who sees me. Who respects my mind. Who stands with me, not in front of me. 9 years ago, my sister stole my fiancé. Today, she's living in a small rented apartment across town, clocking into a 9-to-5 admin job. When her husband eventually leaves prison, they'll both have to learn something they've never known before, how to live without other people's money. And me? I'm here. Building something real. Not a life based on lies or favoritism or empty appearances, but a legacy grounded in truth, hard work, and respect. Marcus squeezes my shoulder. I turn from the patent on the wall and smile at him. For the first time in a decade, I am completely, utterly at peace. Because in the end, this was never just about revenge. It was about restoration. This story isn't about the fall of a liar, it's about the quiet triumph of integrity. Tasha built her life on deception, and it rotted beneath her feet. I built mine on truth, and it endured. Deception is a weak foundation. It always collapses. The real victory isn't exposing the lie. It's living the life so strong, so well built, that the lie destroys itself. True strength isn't in taking what others have, it's in building what no one can ever take from you. And maybe, just maybe, you know what that feels like. Have you ever had to prove your worth to people who underestimated you? Share your story below. I'd love to hear it.